Welcome to Impact Investing, brought to you by the Supporters Fund, the home to the first Tim Hortons, Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. I'm your host, Jeffrey J.P. Potvin, and let's please welcome from the City of Bridges, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Jesse Wiebe, Startup TNT. Welcome, Jesse. It's a real pleasure having you join us
Hey
today.
JP, it's great to be here. Always a pleasure to have a conversation with you.
Well, agreed, man. I'm excited to chat with you, Jesse, because you've done some awesome things. You're a local boy, if you want to call it that, because you've been in the hood in the Toronto area for university, but then also been all over the world. So I'm excited to chat with you because we've already had many chatting discussions around travels, but it's pretty exciting. You've kind of taken up this Canadian homeboy style where you're kind of moving around all the ecosystems in the startup world, and not too many people have done that. So it's pretty exciting to be able to dive in and learn more about what you guys are doing at Startup TNT, and obviously explore more of the great things that go in this ecosystem that you're driving. So, but way to start our show off is you want to start off with one thing about you that nobody would know. And then let's go all the way back to university days and further, if you can share that and just give us an idea of where you're coming from.
Yeah, I also had like two items about people don't know, but the first one I think is often people are a little surprised by is when I was 2 years old, my parents decided they wanted to spend some time in Bangladesh, in Dhaka, doing some work with an economic development agency there, and so I spent like basically the early part of my life. And it's funny you say, I was born here in Saskatchewan, but in so many ways I was born in Bangladesh, because you don't really remember much before you're 2 years old. And so when I think back to like where I started from in my life, I always imagine and envision the life that we had there in Dhaka, and that's really set me up for a life of being more of a global citizen and being someone that likes to travel, and it gave me that wanderlust throughout my whole life.
That's awesome. And I'll add to that what I love about the fact that you've not only been you grew up in Bangladesh in Dhaka, but also traveled through and lived in other countries as well, including London. And I love the idea of the whole travel side. And I was in Bangladesh probably I think it was 3 years ago, and Dhaka was awesome. The street food was incredible. I enjoyed just loved exploring, walking around. I know there's been a lot of things happening there now with government and past issues. And I'm sure in the time that you were there, there was just as many of those types of things that were occurring just based on the way the regimented country works. But it was, I still think the people there were phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal people, beautiful, helpful, super nice. And I really enjoyed my time there because I find that when you're working in a country that has more
Hmm.
struggles because of political and other things, and they mean well, they work well, that the rest of the people just follow that suit of being super friendly and nice to visitors and travelers, and they work their ass off to get further ahead. And I just love the side that they're a growing economy and they're only going to get better. So it was a great adventure of being able to go and travel through
Yeah.
there. So it's a great story. You grew up there.
Beautiful country, yeah, great people, and I got to learn so much. And we also got to travel to India and to Thailand and Nepal. So I'd seen Mount Everest by the time I was 5 years old, and been to Kathmandu and been to all these different places. So my mom always jokes I called it a Catman in the Dew when I was younger, as opposed to, but yeah, and then getting to spend my sort of 20s in London, England, and travel around Europe. It's been a real privilege to be able to spend so much time in other places around the world.
I love it. When you get to learn other cultures, it really changes your perspective on how people are operating, how they're building businesses, how they interact globally. So it's pretty cool to be able to have that experience. And as I mentioned, very few people carry that. So it's pretty exciting that you have that perspective that you can certainly um, offload to other founders. And a lot of the programs that Canada has set up, they're bringing entrepreneurs in all over the world. So it allows for you to operate. And I noticed that even when working with founders in Saskatoon and Regina, you've got such an eclectic group of people that I think sharing those experiences helps them feel comfortable, but also helps them better understand the landscape when they're trying to build their companies in foreign countries or their new home, etc. So pretty exciting. And I guess to take it on that, maybe we can go back and you can share a little bit about yourself and where you've come from outside of obviously your global exposure today, but maybe a little bit more on your background and even from your York University days all the way up to today and what got you involved in the early stage startup space.
Yeah, I always like to start the story with my father because he was an entrepreneur. We did spend that stint from 1991 to 94 in Bangladesh, but prior to that, and actually through that time period, he was building two companies as a co-founder. They didn't even use the term co-founder because that sort of Silicon Valley lingo hadn't hit Saskatchewan yet at that time. But he uh, worked with a group starting in 1979 to build a company called Settler Computer Technologies, and then a few years later started building a company called Cirrus Fertilizer using uranium mines offstream to create an ammonia, a sulfate fertilizer that was, kind of the fourth of the major nutrients that is needed for the agriculture space. And so he was the CEO of the fertilizer company and built and sold that one in 2002. And then Settler Computer Technologies was developed an accounting software for farmers. They actually started it on punch cards back in the day. And would you believe it? It's still running today because it's, as far as we've found, it's the only company that the federal government in Canada has ever acquired. And it was acquired by Farm Credit Canada. And because it was, or at the very least, it was the first, because the government did not know where the buck stopped on who had to sign the paperwork. So they kept going up and up and up until they hit the Governor General's desk. So we've got paperwork with the Governor General saying he's signing off on purchasing the company. And it's still operating today. It's called Ag Expert. It's Farm Credit Canada's accounting software. So I was exposed to entrepreneurship and being around my dad in that sort of hustle culture because he was working long days and long hours. And then on top of that, we have a family farm, and it was relatively small at that stage. But after those two exits, he continued to kind of build that up. And I didn't really appreciate that learning until I got into my 20s. And then when I came home during COVID, as you mentioned, I went to school out east. I actually went out school out east twice. The other sort of thing people might not know is I went to the University of Waterloo for a little while in chemical engineering straight out of high school. I was really strong in math and science in school. I was always a smart kid. I didn't fit in a lot in school here in small town Saskatchewan. I grew up in Langham, just outside of Saskatoon, growing up on the farm, taking the bus to school and all that. But because of my global experience, when I was really young, I didn't fit in the same way. I saw the world very differently. And it was hard for me to make friends. And so I mostly just focused on academics and did really well in school. And yeah, had that affinity for math and science. So I said, hey, combine those two things together, you get engineering. Maybe that's what I want to do. And realized after a few years at Waterloo and doing some co-op, I really appreciate being able to do a co-op program. And I always recommend to young people and parents of young people, if you can get your kid into some sort of program that's got a co-op component, absolutely do it, because it's such a worthwhile experience. And realizing after that, I went to another one of my sort of passions, which has been food. So I tried that for a little while, worked in a kitchen in Saskatoon, and I felt that was sort of my education on society a little bit more, and got to learn sort of the street smarts, as everybody liked to say. I was really book smart, but I didn't have any street smarts. So I learned that through my time at working at an Earl's here in Saskatoon. And then, through that, I was like, what, I want to travel again. And I had kind of gotten stuck, spending so much time in Canada. I was like, what, I want to get out. And so I got a tier 5 working visa and went over to London, England, and spent 2 years there and traveled around Europe. But in that time, and being exposed to the atmosphere in London, right? It's one of the epicenters of the world. And there's just so much there, and I realized I wanted to be a part of this game, like this bigger thing that was happening outside of myself. And in order to do that, I needed to finish my education and get that degree. And I actually just randomly one day looking in a bookstore, because I'd always read books. You can see kind of the shelves behind me. It's kind of further down below, but there's lots of books there. The book Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, and loved that book, and really resonated with that way of viewing the world, and just got into that behavioral economics side. And so I was like, you know what, I want to go study economics, and I wanted to do it in Toronto, and decided to go to York University. They've actually got a really strong economics department there. And I had a lot of friends that I had made in London, that we were all there on visas, and so I got to spend time with all of them in Toronto. And it would also, connecting back to my father again, that's the other half of his degree. He's got an agriculture economics degree from the U of S here in Saskatoon, and so we were really able to connect on that side of things, and learned a lot through that program. Got exposed to a variety of different connections in the Toronto ecosystem, and then eventually, when I was looking to do something after graduation, I heard about an organization called Leaders X, which was a nonprofit, similar in some ways to Startup TNT, the group I work with now, and really passionate about solving problems around the world, but just never really figured it out. But I learned so much through that experience, and unfortunately, that nonprofit eventually wasn't able to make a go of it, so it failed and it was dissolved. And not too long after that, COVID hit, and that really forced me to move home. So maybe I'll leave it there because I've been talking for a little while. Maybe you want to unpack any of that part, but we can get into the next phase here when I came home to Saskatchewan.
Well, that's a great story, and like you said, there's lots to unpack there. And it's interesting because there's a few things that you talk about when it comes to university and your kind of drive for global exposure and traveling and kind of understanding the rest of the world. But you came to almost fall back on school, and I know this has been a hot topic quite often in media, where people are saying, oh, you don't need degrees anymore, they're overpriced, they're overvalued, they don't do anything, just go be an entrepreneur or go work for a company and work your way through the ranks. And it is fascinating because when you look at what universities used to be, and they were a couple of tools that would be enabled for big business. So big business would say, hey, we're going to be looking for these skills over the next 10 to 15 years. Hey, education, can you guys build them so that our frontline people, when we hire them, will come directly from you, but they'll have a couple of years of learning experience through your school. And then when we hire them, they'll be already trained. The government will pay for it, or the people will. And then we can hire them to come work for us. And the education side will be faster to integrate them into our company. And today you've got degrees in so many layers, but they're not really meeting the demand of what business needs, because business isn't dictating it anymore. Business isn't saying you need to get this degree for X. So you end up having a lot of people going into, I want a degree in whatever it might be, but it doesn't fit in the business space. So the business people are like, well, I don't even know how to fit you into this because what you're learning doesn't solve my entry level role. So it becomes kind of difficult. But to your point, you said, I went back to make sure I got the education, that I had to finish it. So maybe just talk to that, because I find that's kind of relatively important. It doesn't matter if you're a startup or you're a big business. What was the driver for you to say, I have to come back and get this degree? Was it classify it as an ego thing? If I don't have this, I'm nothing? Or is it, I'm getting this because, one, it's just letters behind my name that show that I have the determination to complete something? Like, what was the reason you went back? Because it's relatively new. So why did you go back versus just keep working and doing the things you were doing? Because they were generating value and revenue. So why did you go back?
Yeah, it was a combination of factors for sure that made me want to go back. Um, your point there on sort of the ego side slash needing to prove that I could complete something, and have those letters behind my name. The type of roles that I sort of envisioned at the time when I was there in London, sitting on the banks of the Thames, looking at, all the skyline and saying, I want to be able to get up into those offices and operate within those types of spaces. You needed that um, degree in order for people to take you seriously, right? And so I knew that. I absolutely, to your point on learning through the internet, through books, through everything else, I probably could have gotten a lot of the same knowledge and expertise by just doing it on my own. But there is something about the signal that is sent by having a degree that's really important. The other component, I think, going back, and this is really where I provide when I talk to other young people coming out of high school, or the parents of young people, is that the issue in the system is that there isn't enough time for young people to really learn what it is they want to study because they want to do a particular job, right? So I came back to university with a very different lens on the world and the purpose of education, and it really allowed me to take better advantage of the overall opportunity. And I noticed it right out of the gate because I still had to take some, I technically transferred from the University of Waterloo to York University, so I was able to move over some of the credits from my engineering degree, but I still had to take a lot of like entry level classes. And so I'm hanging out with the 17, 18, 19 year olds in those classes, and I could just see it right away in terms of like the way they saw the world, the way they understood the concept in economics and how the market worked, how industry worked, because I had actually been out in the world in business and exposed to that. And so I think one of the issues in our system around education is that we don't have enough opportunity for young people to essentially flirt with different professions, right? That's actually a term from one of my favorite books. It's called Range, by David Epstein, and it's the take on there is that if you have an opportunity to go around and like try out different jobs, and because jobs are so much more than just like knowing this knowledge. It's a whole life that's attached to that job. And so I through my 20s I basically did that, right? I flirted with different professions and got an opportunity to kind of see like, is this the life I want to live? At one point when I was in London, I worked in one of Gordon Ramsay's restaurants, and I did that for about a month because I was like, I liked being a cook and a chef in the restaurants, but I was like, do I really want to live this life? And if anyone here has watched The Bear, which is a popular television show these days, it's a highly accurate view of like what that life can be like. And if anybody's ever considering trying to go down that road, it's not a great life. Like you're working from 6 a.m. to 1 a.m. and you're only getting a few hours sleep, and you're on your feet all day long, and you're getting yelled and screamed at by the sous chef and all of that. I think it's really important to get that exposure into a variety of different areas, and then once you know what you actually want to study and why. I was listening to your podcast, your last episode with Keith Ippel, a great friend over at Spring, and he talks about the why, and that was so critical for me going back the second time, because that's what I didn't have the first time around. Is I very quickly lost the reason why I was studying this, and when I came back and studied economics, I was like, I want to understand this because I want to understand like how it all works. How does the world actually operate from an economics perspective? How does capitalism operate and work? And now in my role in venture capital, it's been invaluable. And I often there's one of my favorite professors, Fred Lazar at York University. He's got these quotes that he likes to use from um, sorry, I'm blanking on his name. But he used all these quotes. Yogi Berra. Used all these different quotes from Yogi that are just still ring in my head all the time, and different moments when I'm in business. So it was a really great experience, and yeah, it exposed me to a lot of different people, and a lot of the connections from there. I'm still running into them today. So it's been great.
Well, there's a couple of things that really stand out about what you just shared. Is what the first thing, and I want to go back to kind of how you dived into this logically, and you mentioned the flirting part, and we'll get to the favorite book in a further on. But you talked about the flirting part, and I think this is such a huge and very powerful piece that we lack as a society. Is that you should be allowed to go in and learn things, try things. And when you're not good at them, know when to cut them off and walk
Mhm.
away. And to your point on the cooking side, I worked as a sous chef in a kitchen for whatever it was, 6 months when I was 17, I think. And yeah, I started off as a waiter because that was the role they offered. They're like, you'd be a great waiter. And within a week, I was like, I can't stand this. I have to be super nice all the time. I have to talk to people. Why do I have to talk to people? I just want to give them their food. They're like, no, you have to talk. I don't want to talk to people. I'm an introverted person. I don't need to talk to people. They're like, you have to talk to people. I'm like, can I go somewhere where I don't do this? They're like, you're going to go from being paid $100 an hour to minimum wage? Yes. I don't want to talk to people. They're like, okay, you can become a cook. So I shifted into being a cook. And people would think I was crazy. They're like, why would you give up all of that cash for that? But the learning is that you have to figure out where you fit into a space in order to deliver the best value that you can to that role. And you talked about um, being able to flirt with that, but there's also a big one which you mentioned earlier on in the us talking is co-op. That it was the best thing that you could possibly do. And I think this carries a lot of weight because this goes for when you're looking for a job or starting a company. You pivot a
Mhm.
lot, and you have to be able to learn how to pivot. And pivot comes from the ability to understand what your threshold is for change. And if I can't figure that out in that short amount of time, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And then I'm miserable, but I've been doing it for 30 years. And it's because you haven't found the thing you like about it so that you'll continue to keep doing it. So in the case of the sous chef, maybe there was something you loved, but you couldn't get that to be the 90% of why you're doing it. It still remained only the 10%. So it wasn't worth driving that forward. So I think that co-opting piece, to your point, is so massive. And there was and I have to look up the name of the book, but it goes to that the guy that did 6 months of saying yes to
Mhm.
everything, and he ended up finding his wife and everything through that process. Is that's what this really is? It's exploring every opportunity, every option that's in front of you, and just doing it, and taking that learning to decide, is this what I want to be doing, and is this something I can get behind for a long time and give it my best, and put out something that brings a lot of value to others and including myself in the future. So I think flirting is huge. The co-op part really supports that. And the end result is that it keeps shifting you and funneling you into a space where you're finding what you're optimizing and being the best at.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I think this is what is missing. When we're thinking about the education pipeline and getting that pipeline for people into business, is getting the exposure to what's actually out there and what type of jobs are even available. Like when I was growing up, I had no idea this job that I have now was even a job, like in terms of like what you could do for a career, right? And I had to like go out and kind of find it and discover it. And there are so many roles and jobs out there, that you can only really find out about them if you start to get out into the world and get exposed to them. And then to your point about jumping between the different jobs, and some people might push back on that and be like, well, you're not going to like learn enough about one particular thing, and it's going to slow down your career trajectory, yada yada. I would actually push back on that, and there's a great book called Skip the Line, which is all sort of pushing back on this idea of the 10,000 hours to be an expert. Well, you don't need 10,000 hours necessarily in that particular field, because you can take skills, knowledge, and experience from other roles, right? I take it from my co-op time and my experience in chemical engineering at Waterloo, to working as I worked as a waiter and a bartender, as well as working in the kitchen in restaurants. I did that for about 10 years. Um, and then also working in a nonprofit, doing all kinds of different jobs, trying to start my own businesses before I moved home during COVID. All of that experience and skill set and knowledge, I bring to bear now on the role that I play, and so people really need to understand that, and young people I think need to know it's like it's not walled off. Like what you learn as a kid and what you learn in school and in high school and then in university, all of that comes into play throughout your whole life, and if you can find a way to integrate all of those different pieces together, you're going to feel much more fulfilled overall.
Totally agree with that. And if we, I guess, paraphrase this segment of discussion, it really comes down to one, exploring every option you have. Two, don't be afraid just to try it. And failure is really not a failure if you're learning something and you're cutting yourself short because you don't see extending that. Like I told you, I could share a story. Like, I worked in a lumber yard for one day for 3 hours. And you would say, well, why would you only work a job for 3 hours? Well, because when they hired me, they said, you're going to stack lumber. And I thought, okay, they're going to pay you $10 an hour. That's great. And you're going to stack lumber. And if someone comes up to you and asks you for any questions, you say no, go talk to that person and just stack lumber. And people kept coming up to me and asking me, hey, what can I use for this? I'm building this deck. And I knew all this information. So I would share, oh, well, you need to do this. I walk them down and give them the right wood. And then the guy comes running out. Stop doing that. That's not your job. You're here to stack wood. And I was like, you dude, you're losing sales. Like, these guys are asking me and I know all this stuff. And I said, you know what? This job isn't for me. And I walked away and I quit. 3 hours on the job. That's it. And they lost someone that had knowledge, that had interest. So, but that experience stuck with me for the rest of my life, because 3 hours isn't really a long time to be an
Right.
employee. But it was the fact that the job wasn't made for me, because I wanted to stack wood and help people build the best product. So you can't do that if you're cutting out the other part of it. So I think in that exploration that we go through, this goes for a startup, and every all this conversation really comes down to, when you start to boil it down, is that even when you're building a company from scratch, you're going to pivot in the first 2 weeks. You're going to pivot in the first hour when you start to understand what you're really trying to sell. You're going to pivot when you're talking with a founder, or you're talking with other founders and people investing, and they're going to say, have you ever thought of this? This might be a better angle. And your brain starts to take all these experiences that you've gained over time, from all of the different countries you've been in, to the work effort, to the classes you took, to all the professors that you connected with. And that's kind of the next point I'm going to get to, is this connection part. But all of these pieces, they all follow experience, which help you get, if the funnel was this big, your funneling is getting shorter and shorter. So you're actually getting to a focus, and it takes all that exploration in order to get there.
Absolutely, it does. Yeah, yeah. And then what's interesting too is, and hearing these stories coming from you on your side, is it seems so often that folks that are working in this space in venture capital and impact investing, that we've had this kind of eclectic career, right? There's no straight path that brought us all into this profession.
It's so true. And even the books you mentioned, like, I'm a data junkie. I love everything data. Everything else doesn't matter in the world. It all works off data. Numbers make everything work. And when you're talking about all the books, Condiment to this, that, I've read all of them. That's pretty much all the podcasts I listen to. Everything to me is about how do you structure data to get to a direction. But there's a lot of similarities, of course, throughout this. And one of the ones that you mentioned that I think is quite huge, and it actually was one of the questions I wanted to ask, because even when I first met you, I found that one of the real criterias that I found that you had that was really strong is that you have high charisma, really a people person, very outgoing. Like, you're almost drawn to you because you have these abilities, right? And you started to mention like professors' names, like, this guy's a rock star, and and throughout that journey, you've probably met people and have names of everybody that you can connect with, and which I think is phenomenal. And I like, from the guy over here watching, I'm just like, oh my god, I'm in awe. How do you do it? Because it's so amazing. And I guess it's a skill I don't have, but it's something that I admire in yourself, but also in people that have that ability to just generally connect with everybody and then remember them and continue to work with them. So in that journey, you've mentioned a lot of this comes down to that networking side. You met this person, they changed this, they gave you this book to read, you learned and you learned, and that's how you kind of keep moving forward. Is there any recommendations you would have to young entrepreneurs, or even high school, university people that are going out there? What things would you recommend they do in order to kind of get better situated for the next 10 years of working life? Is it connect better with people? Is it find specific people to go after, even if there's nothing to do with you? Just make a connection and see them for a coffee every month. Like, what do you recommend helps you kind of move through that channel better?
Yeah, that's a great question. It reminds me of a experience I had when I was about 15. We went to a big North American youth conference down in Charlotte, North Carolina. There was two buses that we took from Saskatchewan, about 100 youth. 40 hours straight on the bus all the way down to Charlotte. So we spent all this time together with everybody there on the bus, and then we get down to Charlotte, and there were all these meals, and you're in this huge meal hall, all these different tables, and you go up to the buffet line, you grab your food, and then you can choose where to sit. And almost all of the people that were on the bus that came down with me would just sit with the people that they came down on the bus with. And I was like, I can see all of you guys back in Saskatoon. Like, why am I still hanging out with you? So I made a point. I kind of made this mental note, and I think this is that lesson. Every meal, I'm just gonna pick a random table with an empty seat on it and just sit down at the table, right? And I did that every single meal, so I'd always just meet people. And so my advice is, just put yourself out there, right? Like that's basically what I did, right? Is I put myself into situations where I would encounter new people and meet new people, and that started from very early in my life, and then it just kept happening over and over and over again throughout the rest of my life. And it's in so many things in life, it's about reps, right? And if you want to get good at connecting with people and building a network, you got to get your reps in, right? And you got to get them in early. And you'll find we're more often than not, yeah, there's some jerks out there, and there's some people who aren't the greatest to connect with. But to your point earlier about, like, say, in Bangladesh, it's like there's great people that want to connect with you all over the world, right? And if you just put yourself out there and take the opportunity to try to connect with them and just answer the question, because they're more often than not, if you sit at a table with a bunch of random people, they're going to go, okay, who's this guy, right? And they're going to ask you questions, and then you do the same. One of my favorite lines too, it's from the show Ted Lasso, is just be curious, not judgmental, right? Go out and try to just learn about people, and if you don't know what to do in a situation, just start asking questions. Who is this person? Why are they here? What makes them tick? Why are they interested in and what they're doing? And they'll tell you, and that's how you can build those connections. And so I got those reps in, and then I got them more and more in as I became a waiter and a bartender. Like I basically ran this dive bar on Yonge Street in Toronto for a couple of years while I was trying to figure out what I really wanted to do, between the nonprofit and Leaders X, and then COVID and everything like that. So that was another opportunity to just get lots and lots of reps in on being in front of people and sort of being on stage, because I was like the main guy behind the bar, and everybody, in the way the bar was set up, everyone was kind of looking at me. And I take all of that skill set and I apply it to the role I fill now.
That's awesome advice. I love that, and like you said, it's the reps. It's repetitive. You got to do it so that it gets ingrained into you,
Oh,
and
there's so many times too
that's
when
beautiful.
I've done it, and I'm like looking back, I'm like, oh my god, like that was embarrassing. But the nice thing is that when you're meeting like new and random people, it's like you're probably never gonna see them again. So like, putting yourself out there, going and traveling, like getting that tier 5 working visa. For those in Canada watching this podcast, like if you're under 30 years old, you can basically move to another country for a year or two and get any job you can get in that country, right? Whether it's Australia, New Zealand, England, if you can speak French, you can do it in France, or Germany, if you can speak German. And all of these opportunities just puts you out there and exposes you to more things and more opportunities and to a better understanding of the way the world works.
I love that, and again, to support that, it really makes a big difference getting out there and working abroad. My brother did um, 1 year abroad when we were young. Like he went to France and Belgium for a year, and it changes you. It really does affect the way you see things. You pick up a stronger language. We were French, so we could learn the language better, faster, whatever that might be. I kind of take what you were sharing about the social side, and a couple of stories popped in my mind, and the one that really kind of stood out was that when I created OPN, and the fund, is that it was everything that I didn't do that I wanted to share back to founders to say, here's the things that are going to help you move faster. It's not because this is what we did to find success. It's the things that we did that were slow and would have been faster if we would have done these things. And the biggest one was really getting out and meeting people. And since it's not my forte, I have to draw people to me. I figure out how can I do this to help benefit other people. So when teaching at, I was teaching at Seneca York University. I had a 5% bonus for students that would go to do a little project. And the project was that you had to go to a conference that was off campus, had nothing to do with the school. You had to go to this, write a one paragraph on what you learned about the thing. You had to attach your ticket. You had to attach a selfie. So you had to actually do a selfie with you at the event because they trust nobody would actually go to the event. So you had to do the selfie, and you had to get 3 business cards, and you had to hand that in, one pager for 5%. And the reason was is that I never did that, and I realized how important forcing yourself to socialize and get into a space and meet people. And I would get letters back from the students saying, scariest thing I ever did, best thing I ever did, I got offered a job, or this happened. And, there was a lot of cool stories that came out of it for just throwing yourself out there. And they were in school just going to an event, right? And I think that it's more people need to push more people to get out of that comfort spot and to use, like you said, I have sat with you on the bus already. Why do I need to sit at dinner? And why do I need to do these things where I'm going to see you all the time? I don't need the comfort. What I need is to expand my horizons, expand where I'm going. And it's so powerful to hear you say that. And of course, including the reps. I love that. It's like you go to the gym, you're not going to get bigger arms if you go once every 2 years. You're going to get bigger arms if you go every day. So how do you equate that back to your everyday life? And that comes from, if I got to go and shake a hand every day, make sure you shake one person's hand. New person every day, go shake their hand. Set your goal and go after it. And it might have some awkward moments and you might have some weirdness behind it, but you're probably going to also have some pretty funny stories and some pretty cool interactions that you're going to gain. But it was well worth the effort.
Absolutely, absolutely agree. Yeah.
So now you kind of take this summarizing of how you kind of moved your way through all these different ecosystems, the growth that you've had, the learning, the connections, the communications. Like there's so many skills that you've kind of built up over time. And then you decided to jump into Startup TNT, and maybe you can share a bit about how that you grew up as an entrepreneur, you grew up in an entrepreneur family, so you kind of already have an idea of how the hustle works. So you've been doing it already by going in and getting this work visa and doing things abroad. So for you, that's kind of second nature because you watched your father or your parents go through the ups and downs of entrepreneurship. So maybe the risk isn't as high for you because you've kind of understood it. But what kind of decided that you were like, what, maybe I'll start a company at the same time, which you did, and then you're like, maybe I'll invest and I'll drive all this forward. What got you really stuck on it? And now you guys have built this great ecosystem where I'm sure you're getting more founders coming to you every day that you can keep up with, looking for capital because you guys are deploying and you're tying into new investors as well, which is phenomenal. So, are there some tips and tricks that you've learned from this, and what kind of got you started in it?
Yeah. The it really started when I came back during COVID time. I had the rule of three hit, right. I lost my job right at the start of COVID. I had been working in hospitality to pay the bills because I was still working on some startup ideas and stuff, but none of them had any cash flow or revenue enough to really pay me. And I don't know if you know this, but rent in Toronto is expensive. So I needed something to pay the bills, and then the world shut down and lost that. And so I was living at home, living off the dole, the CERB there. And then my apartment above mine set on fire. And I was and then shortly after that, the relationship that I had been in for 5 years ended. And so, rule of three, three bad things happen. It's time to maybe, change something up. And so mom and dad said, come back to the homestead, come back to the farm. And that was, a tough decision at the time because it felt like I was kind of giving up on myself in some ways. And in others, it was really the best decision I ever could have made because it allowed me to heal, right? And being around family and being around people that really understand you and want to see you succeed was fantastic. And so I spent about 6 months out at the farm, still during it was fall of 2020 into the spring of 21. Reading a lot of different books, working on myself, going to the gym, and just trying to get myself into a better headspace overall, and having a lot of conversations with my father was a big part of it. And he had obviously has been a successful business person, and we've been transitioning out of the family farm over the last decade or so. He's got a junior partner that he's got a unique joint venture model with to transition because my brother and I, who are the only two kids, weren't going to take it over. And really, when you think about it, the Wiebe family and the extended family on all sides, going back all the way to like the 1500s in Germany, have been farmers. And so it was thinking about, what is the next family business for the Wiebe family. And because on we're the only ones continuing the name. My dad's only got sisters, so it's like, okay, what are we gonna do next? And because we were entrepreneurial, in fact, like I had gone kind of in on it, but not in the same way that my father and my mother and even my brother had gone in on it. Doing it collaboratively as a family. And so I was like, you know what, like it's time for me to come back. It's kind of as the prodigal son and get my hands dirty and go all in as a family all together. And I wrote down a list of different things that we wanted to do, building our own businesses, maybe buying a business, and then angel investing was actually one of the things on the list. And so I got permission. My dad was like, yeah, let's do this. Let's start exploring this. And so we started just like having phone calls with different people, activating all those connections in the network that I mentioned, and actually reconnected with some of the folks that I had done work with through the Leaders X, that nonprofit, because those people were really passionate about solving problems, and I liked the value system that they had. And one of those guys, David Jansen, is up in Edmonton, and he's good friends with Zach and Tim, the two co-founders of TNT. And I was on a call. We were actually talking about a business idea that I had for a startup, and we were just doing a catch up at the beginning. And he goes, I'm doing the Startup TNT thing, da 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 da, angel syndication, networking, yada yada. And I was like, wait, what? Like, what is that? That sounds super cool, right? And so my other sort of piece of advice for people and for young people is like, if you see an opportunity, if you see a door, like seize it. Like, don't, just because you're already moving down one other path, but if you see a really great opportunity, especially one that you've like literally written down and said like, I want to make sure I do this thing, take that opportunity in front of you. And so I did. We connected with the folks in Edmonton there and joined as investors. That was our first an angel investment, was writing that 5K check into the winner of the Edmonton pool. And I started attending the events. It was all virtual at the time. We were doing the happy hours on Discord. For those that don't know, that the TNT and Startup TNT actually stands for Thursday Night Tradition. So every Thursday night there's a happy hour. It now runs in Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, Saskatoon, Regina, and then Winnipeg is combined with the Tech Thursday over there. And the reason why I loved it so much is I loved the community. I liked the type of people that I was interacting with. And I very quickly realized, and I've heard this from other people that are in the Startup TNT ecosystem, that these are my people, right? These are the type of people I want to be spending time with. And so I realized though, but because it was all virtual at that time and we were doing it on Discord every week, it was great, but life was starting to go back a little bit to normal. Vaccines had started been rolled out. We knew that things were going to reopen. And so I was like, you know what? I want us to have TNT here in Saskatchewan, and I'd heard there was a pretty, good tech ecosystem. I think I didn't really fully grasp how amazing the tech ecosystem is here in Saskatchewan. But I got an opportunity to explore it when I pitched Zach and Tim on here's how I would do Startup TNT in Saskatchewan, and they loved it so much, the pitch, that they gave me the job. And so for about 6 to 8 months, something like that, I just did it entirely volunteer. Thankfully, I had the backing of the family to kind of cover my costs and bills. But was able to start building it and ran our first summit in Saskatchewan in the fall of 2021. And maybe I'll just quickly explain, how our model works. I know you had Keith from Spring, that they run a very similar model to us. It was also, we originally kind of borrowed it, stole it like an artist from the folks in Seattle at the Angel Conference there, and actually in the Okanagan they use it as well. It's a sort of pre-commitment model where each investor puts in $5,000 into the proverbial hat, and then over an 8-week period do collaborative due diligence, and enact peer-to-peer learning in order to filter through those companies and then pick one winner at the end that gets the whole pot. The really cool part now is we've expanded the network. It started in Edmonton. The first investment was in February of 2020. We've now got over 100 companies, and our investors are able to invest across the whole network each time we run it because we run them all simultaneously. So starting in about we're filming in August right now, and so we're going to start our next one in September. We're going to have BC, Edmonton, Calgary, Saskatchewan, and then actually life sciences. And all five of those streams, there's an opportunity for our investors to cross invest and syndicate deals into any of them. And after that initial 5K check, we only charge a small fee. And then we don't charge any fees or additional carry on top of that. And that allows a lot of smaller checks to be doled out into these different companies because they can put $1,000 tranches into the companies they want. So through that and through our own investments, I've been able to invest in over 40 companies now through Startup TNT, and then with the family office, we've also got 3 VC funds: Panache Ventures, Tallgrass Ventures, and TNT Capital. So it's been a really exciting journey.
That's awesome and very exciting on what you guys have accomplished and what you've done over the better part of the last 3 years, 3+ years. So, congrats on that. I'm a fan. Certainly enjoy the events and participating. In the future, I hope to participate even more, but I guess that's all going to be determined on the due diligence side because, like everything, you've got to book it in and make sure you stick to it, right? And I'm sure that's the part that you probably find that's the tougher part when you're bringing in investors is that who has the time to kind of funnel through that and make sure that they're part of the system all the way from the beginning onset all the way to the finale. So either exciting, pretty amazing story too, and awesome that the family has created their own kind of venture to support this and create the family office around this to help support entrepreneurs in the region and across Canada, which is always exciting, and hopefully more people will do that. And I think we're going to have a follow-up podcast where we dive in more to how all of these educational pieces work to support the ecosystem and how you get more investors to come in at that smaller check size so that they can get comfortable investing and really get them in, because I think that's super helpful. So I think now what we're going to do is we're going to pivot to our uh, 60-second rant. We had a good long discussion. We're going to jump into that, and then we're going to have to do some quick things after that. So I know we got a time window here we got to hit. So why don't we jump into the rant? I'll put 60 seconds down on the clock, and then from there, we'll say go, and then I'll make that rebuttal. But you fire off when you're ready to start, and we're good to go.
Wow. For those that know me and have hung out with me, especially at a TNT happy hour, they'll know there's plenty of things I could rant about, and so it was tough to pick a particular topic. But I felt with the topic of the podcast around investing and what I do with Startup TNT that I was gonna go with this topic. So here we go. Accreditation is a big problem, I think, in venture capital and angel investing. In twofold. One, it's a bit paternalistic, right? There's nothing stopping me from driving out to the casino, putting everything on black. But as soon as I want to invest it in JP's company, now there's an issue, right? Now I have to have some sort of threshold. So it's like you can gamble. The poorer people, the people that don't have money, they can gamble all they want. But as soon as they actually want to participate in true capitalism, they can't do it. Right. So that's one issue. But really, I think the deeper issue is that nobody really tells you about accreditation. Right. Nobody tells you that there's this mysterious threshold that you can hit. And then all of a sudden you get to basically be a real capitalist. Right. Because yes, you can buy stocks on the public stock market and you can build a portfolio. But as a lot of people have mentioned lately in different articles, like the true gains are happening in the private equity space, they're happening in the space where you're doing those private deals. And I think more, especially young people, need to know it's like, oh, like if I can get to $200,000 a year in salary, or if I can find a way to get $1 million in net worth, then I can do these transactions. I can invest in a part of the economy that's absolutely critical. And the way that the incentives have been structured across the board basically means that most financial advisory organizations don't tell you, right? They don't tell you that this is even available, whether you're working with sort of the Edward Jones of the world or the big banks. And I'm guessing most of those financial advisors aren't going to give you any sort of information about how you're going to invest in private capital, because they have no incentive to do so. They're not going to get fees off of that. So if we really want to create a world where there is more equality and more equity for more people, we've got to find a way to change up the accreditation model, and also change up the way that we educate and tell people about that model. I think a great step forward is this new self-certified exemptions that they have in various jurisdictions. We have it here in Saskatchewan, recently announced in Manitoba as well. But we've got so much more work to do, I think, in terms of education on this side of things, and getting people into the private equity space. So there's my rant.
I love it. It's a fantastic rant, and I will add into it, as much as I'm supposed to rebuttal to this. It's dear to my heart as well. So I'm certainly a proponent of it. You know, when I first started investing 15 years ago and working with companies 20 plus years ago, and then had the opportunity to start investing, this always sat in the back of my mind. I guess you always have imposter syndrome, which is the same problem I had with, when you're doing venture capital and you're like, well, do I own the right to be a venture capitalist? So you start to feel like an imposter there too. So the whole thing just feels like you're an imposter, and even though you're doing the right things. And we've used the papers you talked about, where you can set up and write off and say that you're capable of doing X, and it's only if the government decides to dive into you and see if it's real or if it's fake or whatever the reasons are. I've had investors come to me and say, I really want to invest, but I don't fit this criteria. What can you do? Well, unfortunately, now I can't work with that, because you've now structured it where makes the liability shifts, right? From you telling me and me accepting. So you're right. There isn't fees when it comes to these money managers and how they operate. So how do you look at it as, what is the way to make this more functional so that the risk value is mitigated, and that people that get into this get a learning experience? And it almost feels like we're lining this up for Startup TNT, because you can come in small, learn, and go through those learnings to get into this space. So there's a better value and outcome in the future. If you lose 5 grand, it's not that bad. But if you lose 50 grand or 150 grand, and that happens to be your threshold, then there's a problem. And that's, like you said, gambling. You're going and gambling what you're comfortable with losing. This is a gamble as well. There's high value in this gamble, that you could lose all of this money that you put in. And it's one chunk, one shot, that's it. So, how do you educate people, get them the value that they need to protect their net worth, small or large, to get them through this learning chapter, so that in the next 5 years, you've got some real impactful investors behind you that are investing in great companies and helping build Canada and the ecosystem that it needs?
Absolutely, yeah, I completely agree. And you're right. It is why I love Startup TNT, and that's why I've chosen to dedicate myself to making it go, is because I see the solution to the problems that you've identified in Startup TNT. And by one, removing those barriers on having to write those bigger checks, like that's sort of a built-in structural. It's not even like the companies don't necessarily have to take only 25K 50K checks and up. It's just really annoying for companies to have to like deal with a cap table with hundreds and if not 1,000 investors, because all of them are in for like $1,000 each or whatever, right? And it's also annoying to have to go out and try to like grab all that money from all those different people. So I don't blame the sort of the venture capital game for operating the way that it does, but if we can have more organizations like Startup TNT, like Spring, which is another great organization doing similar work, where you can syndicate those smaller checks, right, and get into more deals and get diversified. A great example of this, there was an angel group in Saskatchewan back in the day called SAS Capital Network, and a good family friend of ours here had done two investments for $25,000 each into two companies in Saskatoon. And we was like, okay, I want to get involved. I want to support my local economy. I want to create jobs and revenue for my community. And both of those ended up going south. And so he was like, he's, very wealthy. He owns a Canadian Tire here in Saskatoon. And um, he could very easily afford to do so, but he lost, both of those investments. And he's like, you know what? I'm not going to bother with this. Screw that. I'm not putting any money into it. But when Startup TNT came along and he got involved in this, he's like, oh, like this is different. I can write 5K checks and to multiple companies and build a diversified portfolio very quickly. This is different. This is exciting. And on top of that, like I'm not just doing it on my own. I can do it collaboratively with other people, and I can learn, and I get the benefit of that wisdom of the crowd. That's allowed. And now he's gotten really active. He's invested in our VC fund as well, and he's super passionate about it. He got his kids involved as well into it, and so being able to have the ability to invest in multiple companies, I think, is really critical and important, and still being able to have quality deal flow, right? I love the folks over at Front Funder. I know those folks. It's great, but to be perfectly blunt, I don't know. I'm not always certain about the quality of the deal flow that you'd be getting through something like Front Funder, right? Because a lot of the high quality deals are done entirely behind the scenes. They never make it onto a platform like that. And so folks need both that access to the quality deal flow and the ability to syndicate. And then to your point, they need that education component. And if I was to say, like, how can we fix the overall accreditation system? I think what the US is doing and what they've been, I don't know if it's fully passed yet, but the SEC has been talking about shifting to a model of a, like some sort of exam or simple checklist or something that you have to go through and basically say, yeah, I understand what I'm actually getting into here, and then you can invest right into private equity deals, and doing more financial literacy around the, as I keep saying, it's like the true form of capitalism, right? Like I think that was one of the key things I really came to understand and changed my viewpoint on money and how we think about building a future for ourselves. Is you want to be investing not just in like an RRSP or a TFSA, but you want to be investing in things with real equity right down the road that can pay off long term. And if we're gonna wall off like basically one of the biggest wealth creators in the world in the form of being investing in startups, whether and if you can do it in other ways too, you can get involved as an employee or a founder yourself. But if you're going to wall that off to like a certain group of people, let's be honest, people who are already rich, right? Because if you're making over $200,000 a year or you got $1 million in net worth, you're pretty well off already. Um, then we're only asking for that wealth divide to keep getting worse and worse, right? And so I think changing the way we allow people to get into this asset class is going to have probably a longer term and a more sustainable impact on the wealth gap than anything else.
Yeah, I love that, and I totally support that. And I will add one other thing is that when you look at the criteria behind it, $200,000 per year, that's less than 10% of the
Yeah.
country. So, and only less than half of a percent have actually invested in any forms of early stage mid tier companies of that 10%. So there is a bigger gap of opportunity. It's just lacking the knowledge, education, and understanding of the space. But it's the same in the US, right? So if you're looking at less than half a percentage of Canada has ever made an investment into an early stage, it's around 1% in the United States. You're still the amount of people of 1% on 400 million versus 40 million is significant, but it's still really small knit community in Canada that can invest or have been investing. So if you want to open things up, I think 20% of Canada generates over 100,000. Are they going to be in a position comfortable enough to still invest? Perhaps not at large amounts, but they can do smaller investments, which help them for the future as well. So just like you would divert, and diversification is huge to your point. How do you get people to educate it and look at all asset classes and saying now that you're over COVID, more people have been educated on what asset classes are and how many there are versus before that. So now people are trying to take control of their financial well-being. And some of these do have higher risk, which is what we're in, but they can look at them and say, I should have the ability to judge where I put my money and how I want to put it in and what I'm willing to allocate based off of my position. I'm not going to come back and say it's the government's fault and I want my money back. It's I've been educated. I signed off on this agreement. I did the questionnaire to your point, and allow people to make those choices just like they did walking down the street and gambling away $10,000 in a night at the local gambling hall. So I think there's lots of avenues that you could educate people on and support them. And I think you have to give people all the cards to let them make those choices. So I do agree. And as much as I want to fight against your rant, I think there's a bigger gap on ways that we can help. And Startup TNT is certainly doing that. And kudos to you guys for doing
Yeah,
that.
and just one maybe last point that came to mind is as you're talking there about where we're at as a country is if we complain all too often in this country that there's not enough early stage capital, that it's so hard to raise, that we pull up the numbers and you compare them on even on a per capita basis with markets in the US like Texas or not like Midwest US states, and we're relatively pathetic in a lot of ways. But then it's like, hey, yeah, but you've also locked most of the capital behind this gate that they can't even get access. They can't even get in. So then you're surprised why there's not the money flowing into the space. And basically the whole system is set up so almost all of that money is being invested in a lot of the time U.S. market equities, right? Like I think the majority of people in this country that are managing their finances, with a financial advisor, and not to say that we don't need those groups, but the way that the incentives are structured currently, that we're pouring our money into U.S. market equities instead of investing it back into our own country, right? So for our own good, we really need to figure out a way to change the way this system works so that we can activate more capital and get more folks in. And you're right, like there's so many people that have risk tolerance, that have the ability to invest, but like maybe they're only making 175K a year, and like why is that person not allowed to write a 5K check or a 10K check into a company? That's just ridiculous, right? And so yeah, I'm passionate about what we're doing at Startup TNT, and even though I'm pushing on this one, I do encourage folks out there. There are other groups that are doing similar work, and we love to see it because we know at TNT that the hill we're trying to scale here, or the mountain we're trying to climb, is massive, right? There's a huge gap, and there's always more need for more capital. So if there's more folks out there that are listening to this podcast that want to do something similar to that, I'm always ready and willing to talk about it and help support them build their own thing in their community.
I love it. Well said and well shared. All right, we're going to move on to the next segment, and we're almost there. So, real quick, we have a bunch of questions. So, you choose what best suits you as the investor, and you pick one or the other. So, here we go. Uh, would you rather invest in a founder or co founder?
Co-founder.
Unicorn or a 4 year 10x exit?
Like, well, I'm gonna go the 10 year, the four, yeah, the yeah,
4 year 10x
yeah,
exit.
4 year,
Okay.
4 year 10x, yeah,
CPG or tech?
tech,
AI or blockchain?
AI. We don't do blockchain. We don't even touch it. Personally, anyway. TNT, there's
All
plenty of
right,
stuff,
fair.
but I don't touch blockchain.
Okay. First money in or Series A?
First money.
Board seat or observer?
Observer.
Safe or convertible note?
Safe.
Lead or follow?
Uh, I mean, we do both, but the other rant I could have done is more people need to lead, so I'm going to say lead.
I would agree with that. We love to lead. So, what do you look when you're making investments? What do you look for in order to make an investment? What do the companies need to have? One or two things.
Well, I mean, it's been said many times before, right? You're betting on the team, you're betting on the founder, so they've got to have, and ideally, yeah, you've got that co-founder. That's why I picked that. Is I know the journey, from inception to exit is incredibly difficult and hard, and so if you have, a quality team where everybody's bought in and they're in on the mission, and you're not doing it alone, that's really critical and important. Um, and then having that unique technology that's like I like the deep tech plays, right? I like the stuff that could transform the world, and I do have the ability to have a diversified portfolio where you can place those bets on some of those things that aren't going to pay off for 10 to 15 years, and at the same time have some other bets that might pay off a little bit sooner. So when I'm looking for the things that I'm really passionate about and get really excited about, it's something that can be truly transformational.
Love it. Favorite part of investing?
The people. I love being around the people, right? There is something so and like positively infectious about being around folks that are like trying to change the world, and at the same time, everybody around them is saying, "Oh no, I don't think you can do it. Like it's going to be so hard." And they're like, "Screw you. I'm going to do it anyway." And having those people being hustled, it makes you get out of bed in the morning and pumped and excited for work. I get to work and solve so many different problems. So like my second favorite thing about investing, especially the way that I invest, is investing in so many different types of things. I don't think this is a unique thing for me, but I got ADHD, and a lot of folks in the venture capital space have that as well. I remember talking to the folks at Golden Ventures about this, and he's like, "Yeah, I love it because I get to like talk. One day I'm talking about a company in the real estate space, and the next I'm talking to somebody in agriculture, and then the next I'm talking to somebody in clean technology, and then you're jumping between all these different things. So I never get bored. There's always new and exciting problems to solve, and I love that.
Agreed. Love it. Number of companies invested per year.
We like on the family office side, we're typically doing, we have been doing 10 to 15. With TNT, we do, I want to say, yeah, like upwards of 20 to 25 a year, depending.
Okay. Verticals of focus.
No particular verticals that we focus on. It's very geographic based with TNT most of the time. We do have three verticals that we focus on or have focused on in sort of clean climate technology, agri-food, and life sciences. But on the family office side, we're across the board. Obviously, as you could probably pick up from my history and my father's history, we're very passionate about the agriculture and food space. So we definitely have an affinity for that. But we've got investments across all verticals, except for blockchain.
Love it. Fair, fair. What is a piece of advice you give founders 9 out of 10 times?
Whoa, there's so many pieces of advice. The one I was actually having a conversation about this last night, and talking about investment is you need to be raising capital all of the time, right? And then going back to our conversation about building connections and building a network, you need to be getting out there and building those relationships. It is a relationship game, and as much as we like to say the reason we make these decisions is almost entirely objective. We're looking at the data, we're breaking it down on a spreadsheet and doing data analysis. There's a lot of like emotional and subjective components that get added into the decision making at the end of the day. And so much of it is often like a gut read of you know is this person, especially at the stage we're investing at, the early stage, but is this person somebody I want to be betting on? And in order for investors, especially more sophisticated investors, to feel comfortable on that side of things, they have to have a relationship with you. So if you're a founder out there, get out, build those relationships. And I've seen it within Startup TNT. Companies will come in and apply, and they think they can just get all the way through to the end simply on the back of like, I've got a great idea, it's a great company, we're selling, look at our metrics, yada yada yada. But they've never shown up to a happy hour. They don't show up at events. Nobody's ever met them in person. No one's ever really talked to them. And then they're shocked when they get eliminated from the process, and they're like, "Well, but like everything is great." It's like, yeah, but like nobody knows who you are, and nobody's building a connection with you. So you know, show up to things, meet people, and then you'll be more successful.
I love it. Well said. All right. We're last question before we jump into the personal questions. Who was your hero, mentor, and why?
Oh, um, I mentioned him earlier. I got so many different people that could be. And actually, as I'm thinking here out loud, I almost want to say my father, actually, and that's actually been an incredible relationship and to be able to have over the last few years. And but it does feel a little cliche. I think a lot of sons like to say that about their dads if they have the type of relationship that I do. But the other one I mentioned earlier on the podcast is Fred Lazar out of York University in Schulich. Learned so much from him. He's that type of person that just tells you like it is and doesn't hold back. And there were a number of um, students in the class that like you're like that guy's a jerk. I hate him. But and having spent some time now out in the world and out in business, I'm like he gave me the best advice I've ever learned, and he had so much experience. You know, he worked in government. He's worked and worked for Canada for many years. You know, worked with startups in Silicon Valley, and so I learned so much from him and his experience, and I always appreciated him just not holding back and just telling it candidly.
Awesome. All right, personal side. Favorite movie and what character would you play?
What character would I play too? One of the ones I've always loved is V for Vendetta. I love that movie.
Great
Yeah, it's a
movie.
great movie. It's one of those ones that I can go back and rewatch. So I don't know if you know like, maybe playing V, would be the one I'd like to do. But spoiler alert, it doesn't end so well for him in that movie. But he does achieve his goals at the end of the day. So yeah, it's yeah, great movie.
Great. Favorite book?
Favorite book? I think I'd have to go with Thinking Fast and Slow. But since I mentioned that already on the podcast, I can also mention Noise, which was sort of the follow up to that book. I've been thinking about that one a lot more lately, as we're out, making decisions and picking companies to invest in.
Perfect. I love it. Great book. Favorite sports team?
Oh, Toronto Raptors. I'm a huge basketball fan, and I got to be there in Toronto and work right downtown during the 2019 playoff run. So yeah, the Raptors are now imprinted on my soul, and if I ever have the pleasure of being able to have kids and get them exposed, I'm absolutely going to be taking them to some games. So I'm excited for that.
A great team. Brilliant. Cake or fortune cookie?
Fortune cookie.
Superman or Batman?
Batman. You can see it right there behind me.
I love it. DC or Marvel?
But then on the other side, I'd pick Marvel.
It's counterintuitive, but that's okay. They're both
Yeah.
great. Football or football?
Um, Having lived in London, I like the real football. I got the privilege of going to an Arsenal game once. A friend of mine bought me tickets. And you really haven't seen football till you've experienced it in a European stadium, because it's unreal how big they are and just the atmosphere in the crowd. And I think like I wish like North American sports fans could take a lesson from European sports fans in terms of like the songs and the things that they say out loud, because like so often it's just like let's go Raptors. It's like yeah, but then they're all singing these different ballads and things. You're like, how does like 50,000 people in this stadium know the exact words to say? They're all singing along. It's pretty cool.
No, that's amazing. And I'm an Arsenal fan,
Oh, there you
and
go.
I've been to the match. I've been to London, of course, but I've been to matches all over the world. And it's one thing I do in every country is I go to a football match. And I completely agree with you. You want to understand the heartbeat of a country? Go watch a football match, a live football match, and you'll find out how passionate people are, how much energy there are. It is incredible. And from Qatar to Kuwait to you name it, Spain, I've been everywhere, and I think it is just you have to watch football. It's the only way to show and prove that the country's excited and they're backing their team. And you go somewhere where they don't care about sports, it totally changes.
Absolutely.
So, um, Last one: Elon Musk or Oprah Winfrey?
Yeah, I loved Elon for many years, but I don't like the way he's gone. So I'm gonna have to go with Oprah.
I love it. All right, we're getting down to the last question. What is your superpower?
Um, I'd say my ability to connect. You mentioned that. I think you teed it up for me so easily. I because of my experiences, because of being able to travel all over the world, I can very quickly find something that I can connect with folks on, and and build not just a superficial connection, but like a real relationship. And I guess this is my one last sort of piece of advice is that I like, and this is one that I like to give to a lot of young people, is networking is not about the network, it's about the connection, right? And about building real, true connection with people. And if you can do that, then you will have the network, because that's what a network is. It's a series of links and connections between people, right? And so don't focus on the transaction. Focus on like getting to know them and actually like really uh, knowing them on such a deep level that they feel that you like them, right, more than anything. There's another great book called Persuasion that talks a lot about how you can convince somebody to do something, and one of them is if they consider them to be your friend, right? And so to build, and don't just like superficially create friends, like build a real friendship with somebody, right? And it'll pay dividends for years to come.
I love it. Well said. You're 100%. You're a fantastic people person, and it's been great getting to know you myself. So I'm a big fan. So I guess to end our show, I want to say thank you very much for sharing everything, Jesse. It's been a great conversation, lots of notes, and the way we like to end our show is we like to give you the last word. So please share how people can get in touch with you, and then any last words you want to share to the startup community or investors. I turn it over to you. But thanks again for all your time today.
Well, yeah, thank you, JP, and thank you from the community for doing this podcast and for giving a platform for folks like myself and for many others in the investing space to tell our stories. It's a critical and important role to play in the ecosystem, and really been a pleasure to spend my morning here with you and have this conversation. Um, yeah, so get in touch with me. My email is just Jesse, Jesse, at startuptnt.com. You can feel free to reach out. All of the information about our programs are up on the website. If you are an accredited investor, or like myself, you have family members that are accredited. Like when I started, like I did take advantage of my father and his ability to be able to do this, and then arranged a relationship with him. There's a lot of folks actually in the TNT ecosystem. That's something I noticed right away. There were a lot of sort of parent-child pairs within the TNT community, and so if you are the son or daughter of a baby boomer, and they're like, hey, I want to do some generational wealth transfer, TNT is a great way to do it. And if you're a founder looking to raise capital, and you're in Western Canada, you need to be in the geographic regions where we operate. You can apply. Summit 10 kicks off on September 25th, and then there will be another one again in the spring. So keep your eyes out for those applications. And then one final group I'll mention: if you're out east in Eastern Canada and you're watching this and going, hey, I really wish Startup TNT was here, um, I would love to talk to you about how you can make it happen and build it in your community, because we are always looking to grow and expand, and we've got a bit of a playbook to help you get there. And if you build it, you're gonna play a really key role in the ecosystem, and you're gonna reap a lot of benefits from it. So encourage those that are interested in helping us grow and expand. We want to be in 100 cities in 10 years. That's the goal. So we got a ways to go yet, and we're gonna need more people on the team to get there.
I love it. Brilliant. Well shared. Thank you very much again, Jesse, for all your time and sharing. It's been
Yeah,
awesome.
thank you,
Thank
JP.
you. All right. That was a great conversation with Jesse. so much great learnings there, and I love where he's come from. And a couple key points I'll point out from that is, the whole idea of early stage flirting, which was the learning from other people, learning different jobs, jumping into things, even if it's a short term, take the learnings, go on to the next, know when to change, when to move out, doing that co-op thing for school, for work. It's a great way to meet people, puts you into the environment, gets you learning, decide if it's something you can do for the rest of your life. To his point, it was doing reps, put yourself out there, challenge yourself every day. If it's to shake one hand every day, or if it's to, there was a great book on a guy that was just hugging people every day. And his goal was to hug 10 people a day or something. So I guess in a way, just put yourself out there, put in the reps. That's what's going to help you change and become that more dynamic. Be curious, ask questions. I think this is going to help you really diversify yourself. And then, when it comes to investing, educate yourself, learn, go through the ropes, work with companies like Startup TNT, where you can make investments into early stage companies and really gain a lot of value from that by going in small and learning your way through it all. So fantastic discussion. So outside of that, I want to say thank you everybody for joining us today. If you enjoyed the conversation, please feel free to share with your friends, subscribe to our YouTube channel, or please follow us on Spotify, Amazon, or Apple. You can find us on all social platforms, including LinkedIn at Supporters Fund. Your support and comments are truly appreciated. Please visit us at supportersfund.com or startup events at openpeoplenetwork.com. Thank you and have a fantastic day.